Okay, so this is Keanu. Have you met Keanu? And this is Keanu after the remote working day. And this is his work. So you can tell that the guy is pretty awesome, right? Cool. So who am I? My name is Ricardo. I'm an independent software engineer and working for BuzzFeed. That's my Twitter handle and my GitHub handle. You can find me there. And my talk today is about something in Latin. No, it's not there. So, fiat lux, let there be light. What does that mean? So, like in the beginning of times, projects and software projects are convoluted. It's always a big mess of things that you have to take into account, and a lot of new concepts and new things you have to understand to put a software project on live. There's so many things that you have to consider, like requirements. There are too many or too difficult, and sometimes you don't understand them, and that's fine. There's also a little bit, sorry, just a side note, I'm looking at my notes because I have a brain of a 2-year-old, so I don't remember everything. But yeah, requirements, too much, and there's a tendency for you to bite more than you can chew. There's system architecture. Usually, this reflects a little bit the understanding of the business at the time, so you tend to build the system architecture a little bit convoluted and weird, which is fine, it's okay. And there's also system tooling. And this is mainly influenced by what do you know, sorry, I'm probably on the front of you. What do you know about the tooling? What's your preferences? How do you, if you are an active member of the community of that tooling or not, that can be an influence as well. So there's a lot of stuff to consider, and that can be really fucking daunting, right? So many things. What the hell? What am I going to do with this? Well, it's fine. Just build it. No worries. So the important thing is your software should be should stand the test of time. It's facing an ever-changing environment, constantly evolving and adapting. So this means that your software should not be a black box and impermeable from the outside or pond. It's evolving. There are new things constantly being added to the software. So the way that you or your team approach that has a big influence when you refactor the piece of software. There are a few things when you, okay, so you build the software and now you have to fix stuff or upgrade your stuff. And there are a few things that you have to consider. One of those is flows of change. Flows of change are events that occur constantly and produce a steady stream of updates to your software. One example is scalability. So do your software need to be served from, I don't know, tens of thousands to like millions? Do you need like change your database engine? Do you need an elastic load balancer? Probably not. You just have to consider what your process is. There's also integration. So at some time, probably you need to integrate your software with something else. And you probably don't need it. There's several options. I mean, you need to integrate, but okay, so should you need to bring the SDK and the API to your software and build the stuff in your software, or can you outsource that to the other software? Like, for example, Facebook, you can, for example, use the marketing API and do stuff on your software using the marketing API, or you can use Power Editor to launch your ads. The same happens for a payment gateway. You can integrate using an SDK, a payment gateway into your software, or maybe that payment app has already a software that does that for you, and you can just outsource the action to that software. There's also security, and this is really steady because you need to constantly be aware of your app and how secure it is. But sometimes you can consider, do you need two-factor authentication? Probably not. Is your software running in-house on a closed network? We don't have access to the internet, so you probably don't need two-factor authentication. And there's also business requirements. So just give me a moment, please. Where is it? I need notes. Yeah. So yeah. So these are probably the most influential. Yeah. Sorry. Flow of change of all. So this, you have your people, your stakeholders always telling you, okay, so the software should be doing this, and there's constant change when a product manager is always trying to adapt your software to the final client. Yeah, so these are flows of change. There's also something called agents of change, and agents of change are all the participants that directly influence the flows of change. So examples of that, stakeholders. So they usually tell how the software should work or what should it do. Sorry. Oh, yeah. They should tell you that, and they set the guidelines for you to build the software. Teams. Oops. Okay. Teams. So these are dynamics bodies of knowledge, and a change on a team might have a direct impact on a refactoring process. So it can hold it back, or it can push it forward. It really depends a little bit on how the management of the team is holding. Damn it. And there's individual preferences. So these are the more disseminated ones. So probably people on a team prefer React over Angular, or prefer Go over Python, or whatever. There's a lot of preferences on a team. So, but they are really disseminated, but they should not be the most important thing. There's a team, so everyone should converge to the same point. And there's blockers. Examples of blockers are time. Time is probably the more the ruler of a blocker. when you're refactoring, there's usually a concept that, not a concept, sorry. There's usually this thinking that, okay, you don't have time to refactor. You just need to ship it. You just need to build new stuff. You don't have time for that. That's what your product manager says. That's what you're thinking most of the time. So yeah. Humans. So humans can be blockers as well. I mean, back into the individual preference. I mean, if you have a preference for view, you'll try to, it depends on your personality, of course, but you'll try to vouch for view instead of vouching for the current framework or library people are using. And that can be a blocker if you're trying to refactor something. Tech debt. Yeah, so imagine this. You have a huge monolith, and you look at that. It's like I don't know, thousands of lines of code. And you look at that, and you think, yeah, I'll do this later. So I don't want to touch this. So yeah, I don't care. And this goes on, and you have a huge thing that needs to be split up or rethinking, and can be a blocker. Also, there's this funny thing. I was in Iceland back in this month, and someone told me there's this funny thing of a power plant, and they build a power plant and a small village with for the workers of the power plant. But they knew that building a village in there, it's a little bit risky because it was a seismic area and stuff cannot work well, and eventually everything could fall apart. So yeah, okay, let's do this. So time passed, they kept building, things work well, but one night there was a seismic event, and someone in his house got a pool of hot water, not spring, on his living room. So it's like, yeah, so just forget about the details and let's keep building. Let's not just rethink this and let's keep building. They ignore the fact. Okay, so what do I have next? Universal truths. Okay, so these are things that don't change that often. Flowcharts. Flowcharts are things that don't change that often and are really useful when you try to describe something and you want to make like refactor. And this can really gives you an eye level of what you're trying to build. Language primitives. So you can probably do pretty much what you're trying to do using language primitives. I'm talking about, in JavaScript, I'm talking about map or reduce or for each. You can do pretty much everything you need with those instead of using a library like Lodash, for example. Of course, it all depends on the use case, but you can do that, so consider that. Meetings. So meetings are nice social events. They are good for you to share some knowledge about what you're trying to build and what you're trying to change, and you should do it that often. So they are great sandboxes for refactoring. Just try to moderate the use of them. All right, so we've spoke about adaptation, universal truths, blockers, flows and agents of change, how all this gets together. So first of all, you should have a sense of holism. You need to see the big picture. So everything is kind of connected, so you need to understand how everything works. Oh, damn it. Okay. There's teams and stakeholders. Sorry. Back to my notes, and I do not. Okay. Sorry. Oh, damn it. Like I said, I have a 2-year-old brain. So teams and stakeholders, you need to facilitate the synergy between them. You need to make them work together. Engineers, stakeholders, product managers, you need to gather together before you start a refactoring process. Make everyone on the same page. Make everyone understand the same problems. There's this micro refactoring thing that the engineering part should be doing often. There are small things like, okay, usually it's connected to how you read code and how it's expressed. So you should be able, and as engineer, you should be able to look at things and criticize your work, not only the others, but criticize your work and do small adjustments to what you're doing. Of course, you need to test this, and you need to ask for a review from your peers to validate your ideas. There's the macro refactoring part. Macro refactor, you need to kind of design a more high-level understanding of what you're trying to do, and you need to have some documentation, more or less solid flow of steps. You need to have some more, not too ad hoc refactoring. Communication. So this goes back to meetings. So you need to communicate really well your intents. You need to get everyone together and communicate. Do that often. That's good. Like Andrea said, especially if you work remotely, it's kind of imperative that you do this. Like, communicate your intents. It's really important. And then deploy it. So you did something, you met all the expectations from your stakeholders, you have something that works, just deploy it and wait until it breaks or there is another requirement, and repeat everything again. So I think most of you probably are thinking, what the fuck is this guy talking about? And sorry, there's some small children on the audience. What the hell is this guy trying to talk? So what I'm trying to say is that Refactor, I put is not, but it shouldn't be your process. I mean, you shouldn't let yourself guide by the new hype of React or the new hype of whatever language you have, you know, or you think, okay, if I use this, I'm going to build that app really, really well. That's not true. You're just going to add more complexity, and you're going to lose time, lose money, be less productive. So consider what you already have. You can simplify it and discuss with your team before you take the decision or to use another lab. There are cases where you should actually just use some other tool. So imagine that you're trying to have some image processing and you have an app written in Python. So you probably can use Go or some other thing that has parallelism to do that. But it's up to you. Thank you.